However, if they go back to that fast pace they showed at MSI, that group stage winning fast pace, they should be in with a very good shot.
We're about to find out, just minutes away from game time. TSM ended summer slightly slower than they started. And I want to see what they decide to play. Jace is taken off the table, as well as now Nidalee by RNG.
And I think a lot of that is the worry. TSM averaged about 32 minutes a game in the regular season, and that ballooned to 38 minutes in the postseason because they actually said nerves got to them a little bit and they were afraid of making mistakes. They can't play slow against RNG because this team will definitely be the initiator onto you. I'm very interested to see which lanes these teams prioritize for strength in the picks and ban phase, because there are incredibly strong laning players in every position in this matchup.
And for the second time in 2 Chinese games, we've seen jungle pool heavily targeted.
Triple ban.
Out of RNG this time, and that means that one more time, MLXG is confident on the likes of the Graves. We'll see whether this gets into Svenskeren's head, although he plays pretty much everything as well.
And Svenskeren has been an incredibly good Lee Sin in the past. I do not think he would be hesitant to pick that whatsoever if RNG does decide to go with the Graves, which has had pretty poor success so far today because of the lack of early jungle pressure and falling behind in matchups. What will TSM do with this first pick? I'm gonna say it's not Kazakhs.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's not Kazakhs as well. MLXG, Malashankor, is also a very good Lee Sin player historically. However, it doesn't really suit RNG's playstyle, you would have to say at the moment. They do need him on a tank because Looper is a little bit more of an AP carry top laner. So we'll see whether they do decide to run another tankless lineup, because one more time, they've been very mixed success.
So,
oh, wow, there's a...
Yeah, they're definitely going for some bottom lane, as the Lee Sin is also locked in on the other side. So that's actually an adaptation they've made. Lee Sin is the number 4 jungler for them, and that's a very clear strategy. But specifically the Nami is something that must have been crushing in scrims, because the early laning phase, as well as the general anti-poke it provides, has been picked by pretty much every team in every group, at least as a high priority. So we're going to see a ton of Nami at this World.
And I actually love it into Mata, because he's a big melee support player. Likes the Alistar, likes the Braum, and Nami can shut down a lot of that aggression with the bubble as well as the tidal wave and keep you topped up. Unless you get all in, you don't really lose the Nami lane. So we'll see whether Uzi and Mata adapt and get a range support themselves.
Right, what are TSM going to be locking in? They've hovered a bunch of jungle picks already. You assume it's going to be the Graves because we feel like that's higher up on the tier list. Is that something Svenskeren will be happy with? And what else will TSM lock in as well?
I think Svenskeren would be relatively happy with the Graves. The other pick could just be an 80 carry choice if TSM really just want to lock down that duo lane early. Wouldn't be too surprised. The Skarner is not Graves. That is definitely not Graves and was very unexpected.
Yeah, it certainly is, but it is one of the picks. It kind of ruins Lee Sin's day, to be honest. As soon as you fly in there, look for that kick, he just grabs you and blows you off. Very good counter initiation out of that jungle pick for TSM.
Gentlemen, in the previous game, I remember a Kled into Rumble, and I remember talking about how Kled and Skarner work well together. Am I getting too excited too early?
Yeah, I mean, there's also mixed opinions on whether or not the Kled is a good matchup into the Rumble. We haven't seen enough of it on the competitive stage. The Karma Sivir is actually a very NA bot lane that was something that Doublelift and Biofrost played more than almost anyone else. So both teams still going pretty hard into the bottom lane. I'm super curious to see what the 2 solo lanes are here, since the mid lane could be either a Karma or something else for RNG, so TSM has to pick it somewhat blind.
One thing we did see in the LPL quite heavily is the very supportive mid lane Karma. I think that it made an appearance in North America as well. I'm talking about, you know, with the Athenes, with the Ardent Sensor up there, and really getting behind 80 carries with AoE crit, like the Jinx, like the Sivir and the Twitch. So if they do really want to go for a Raise the Puppy comp, that is a possibility.
15 seconds left. Kled is being hovered. I want it, and I think San Francisco wants it, but it's going to be swapped away. Smarter, safer pick. Cassio and Kennen. That is a wombo combo if ever I've seen one.
And I actually think it's more reliable initiation than the Kled. If you're thinking about Hanser being able to flash in and go for a big play, it also gives some pretty solid gank setup if Looper wants to shove that lane in, because Svenskeren can waddle up there on Skarner and still get the stun chained off of Kennen. So I do like that choice from TSM.
And I actually love team comps like this because they have such good initiation, but they also have such good anti-dive coming out right now out of TSM. RNG is a team that if they do get a lead, likes to play fast. Oh. What the heck? This is a foreign pick in the LPL. I think only Bamey played it. Aurelion Sol.
Yeah. At MSI, Xiaohu didn't even know what all of his skills were when he played it against Tuhi the first time. So a lot has changed since then, including Uzi being on the bottom side of this map. So I love this pick and ban phase.
RNG did bootcamp in Korea. They were one of the first Chinese teams to move over, if I recall correctly. They've mixed a few things up. We've seen that Karma mid, this time it's support. What do we make of this team composition? Because it's fairly squishy in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. It's fairly low on tanks, and that does open them up to some big wombos from Kennen. But if they do pull ahead, it gives them damage and an exceptional amount of wave clear in every single lane so that MLXG can start invading the jungle and kind of do to TSM what TSM did to everyone in North America.
Yeah, and the other thing is they just have such good bottom lane dive. If Aurelion Sol leaves, and we've already talked about how well the Rumble can shove up, that can be 5 members in bottom lane, and a lot of LPL games were determined by who got 5 members there first.
We'll find out exactly what they do. It's been over 7 months since Doublelift has played Ezreal. You're about to see the team compositions on the screen. We know that China's not a big Twitter fan, but I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how one-sided this vote is. Jump on Twitter, tweet at LOL Esports, hashtag TSM win, or hashtag RNG win. Join the conversation, hashtag Worlds. Ladies and gentlemen, it is one of the pre-tournament favorites. Team SoloMid taking on Royal Never Give Up for the last game of day 1 here in San Francisco. Just how good are both of these teams?
And I really do think that is a big question, specifically for RNG, because TSM, who have been the picture of consistency domestically, is almost shadowed by how up and down RNG has been. They were so good at MSI, but the back end of their season was not impressive.
Exactly. RNG completely fell to the global team compositions of EDG and were not able to sustain any advantage out of their bot lane. And now we're into this matchup between TSM and RNG, and all the cards are on the table. It's a best of 1. This is an incredibly competitive group at the top between TSM, RNG, and Samsung. One of those 3 teams will not be able to advance to the quarterfinals, and every team only plays each other twice, so much rides on every single game.
I want to see how well Bjergsen handles himself in the middle lane. Domestically, he was a player who was under a whole lot of pressure, a whole lot of time, and now he's in a matchup that I feel Xiaohu can fairly safely and fairly easily shove that wave in, sit on the back line against the short range of Cassiopeia.
Yeah, Aurelion Sol has actually been banned heavily, and I think will be banned heavily throughout the World Championship, in part because of the early game lane that he's able to push in. He can shove in pretty much every other champion in the game, and then even threaten the Raptor camp to get an even larger lead in that matchup. And with TSM starting Skarner and Kennen over on the top side of the map, Xiaohu's going to have freedom early on in the lane.
All right, for what I feel like the first time today is double range supports into one another. Going to be a lot of trading, a lot of aggressive back and forth. Xiaohu with the very early, very cheeky Wraith steal that we're seeing a lot more that's sort of popularized on 615.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see what happens in this dual lane in the bottom side, as we have an unfortunate pause coming, because that's a lot of poke that TSM just ended up taking from the Carmen Sivir. And like we said, as far as 80 carries at the World Championship, they are the 2 best laners from a CS differential perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Uzi is up 9 at 10 minutes. Doublelift's generally up about 6. Uzi's balloons to 18 at 20 minutes. Doublelift stays around 13, so both still very good at picking up that farm. And you can see already in this lane, RNG are just focusing out heavily the creeps to try and get the shove, because that's how they like to play Sivir. They like to force you under turret when it happens consistently, and those dives do come out of Fog of War. Very hard to predict when they're going to come out.
All right, just to give you guys a quick update, Bjergsen has reported to the referees that he's currently unable to see Aurelion Sol's orbs. Now, this is being reviewed. The QA team backstage are looking at the footage and looking at his player cam. Once I get an update, I will pass that on. But that is a worry. That is a concern. It has happened before.
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing for Bjergsen. Last time he played against Aurelion Sol was in the North American playoffs.
I was about to say, you guys should hire this guy in North America as QA. He catches all the Aurelion Sol bugs.
Oh my goodness. So an unfortunate pause here for sure. We will get word on exactly what is happening.
And in terms of what is happening, client restarts. Going to reload it up, try to jump back in, take a look at the graphical effects, and see if we can resolve that issue as well as a few extra steps afterwards. And then we can see what this impact will have in terms of the laning phase, because I was mentioning it before, Bjergsen, the recipient of enemy jungle proximity, a whole lot. This is a guy who everybody wants to camp, right? Because he's one of the carries for TSM.
That's the interesting thing. As far as the mid laners that have been tracked that are the non-LPL mid laners at Worlds, he is the highest opponent jungle proximity, and what that stat means is that it's the percentage of time that the enemy jungler spends within 2,000 range of the mid laner. So Bjergsen does draw a lot of attention and doesn't necessarily get the attention himself. So it's a testament to how strong of a laner he is that he still provides so much pressure, and I think is one of the reasons he's the MVP.
Yeah, it definitely is. The other thing that he does incredibly well is facilitates Svenskeren to get into the opponent's jungle. I mean, Svenskeren does the largest amount of counter jungling as well in the whole of Worlds, and I think that that really is a testament to how well Bjergsen fends off 2 opponents and unlocks his jungler to be able to get things done elsewhere.
A lot of pressure then on Svenskeren as well as the rest of TSM. So you guys know they are doing a couple of tests, just pausing and unpausing, double-checking whether or not those particles are in fact visible. And with a little bit of luck, don't get too excited, I'm afraid.
Very quickly. It looks like there's going to be one more pause. That doesn't look good, quick shot.
No, it doesn't look good. It is a warrior. As we said, it is part of these QA process. You need to go through a few different attempts. We'll give you guys an update once we hear a little bit more, but...
Yeah, so there is a little bit of precedence for what happens when bugs like this happen. If it's a bug that can't be fixed in the game, so to speak, it has been game of record so far, so if they do remake the game, they would do it with the new picks and bans. And if they remake the game because the Aurelion Soul bug is deemed unfixable, there's a chance that it would be turned off for the rest of the tournament, which would actually have massive implications as far as Worlds is concerned. But that's reading a little bit too much into it. Currently, they're still going through the process. Yeah. Apparently, the orbs disappeared very quickly after the pause again for Bjergsen, so they're currently looking into it, and we'll get back to you as soon as we know the ruling.
Yeah, exactly. So we've spoken a lot about the mid lane matchup because obviously the Aurelion Soul was very pivotal when you look at Xiaohu versus Bjergsen. But let's talk about Hornstar on this Kennen. The combo potential with Svenskeren on Skarner. Those are 2 picks that were sort of in the conversation of what we're anticipating here at Worlds. But looking at picks and bans wins, Jat, what do you think then in terms of how TSM directed their top duo lock-ins?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good combo as far as being able to assist the Skarner with cannon initiations, but it does kind of change the power dynamic between the jungle and the top laners. Svenskeren during the regular season was incredibly pivotal in their engages, as were most junglers who's played a lot of Gragas and Rek'Sai, and he basically lived in the enemy jungler. One of the big things about Gragas and Rek'Sai is they have very good outs when they're invading the enemy jungle, but Skarner doesn't necessarily have those same abilities to run away if he does get collapsed on. So I think in this game in particular, if Svenskeren wanted to play exactly the same style as he did in North America, it would be more difficult because assuming we continue to play, the Rumble, the Aurelion Soul, and the Sivir would have the lanes pushing up, and there's a lot of talk about the lanes enabling the jungler rather than the other way around this year. And in this situation, it's actually RNG's lanes that would enable the jungler, and TSM would have to play a bit of defense.
One thing you do have to look at, however, is the fact that the layered CC in top lane is so incredibly potent for TSM. And RNG is known to leave Looper on an island. So if this does get to level 6, or even, a cheeky gank at level 4 when he's able to reapply the stun and, keep slowing down the top lane, I think that Svenskeren does have some ins against Looper. And we've already seen so many times, if you get Kennen ahead, the turret dives, the ability to teamfight just becomes so incredibly scary early on in the game.
It's definitely a win more button type of champion with a lead. Ladies and gentlemen, just as an update, as we continue to investigate the issue, we are going to send it over to Dash and the rest of the analyst desk to talk about the game.
Thank you very much, Quick Shot. Now, currently, we do have our refs setting up a custom game to test a few things regarding this bug. There's a theory that perhaps the bug is linked to the skin choice. If that's the case, then ideally we can work around it. So while they're pursuing that option there, we get some time to break down this game. Of course, we haven't seen a whole lot yet, so I do want to talk about champions like primarily Nami's continuing to be highly prioritized, but then the Skarner pick.
Yes, and for the entirety of the regular season, North America has been the region that doesn't really clinch the jungle pool. We rarely see targeted bans, and RNG, on the other hand, on the LPL, they do this a lot. So one of the tests for an NA would be, can they handle a targeting of the jungle pool against them? And it looks very much like so. That's five junglers that Svenskeren has to be able to play. Lee Sin, Elise, Nidalee, Rek'Sai, and now with the Skarner, obviously a low-pressure jungler early on, but he's so strong in skirmishing, and I'm really excited to see this because it forces QSS out of everything, and there's so much CC out of TSM.
All right, well, so the Skarner itself being a strong pick, we'll see if the play can now support the pick, because that's the big question. He's forced down onto something that he's obviously probably not as comfortable as the top 3 or top 4 picks, but we'll see if the play develops from there. You have something to say, Papa?
I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise that Nami's taken first pick. That's been the story so far this tournament, but it's at quite a high cost. Because of the 3 jungle bans, Sifra Karma is the completed bottom lane that's given over to RNG. Karma does very well against
Nami.
against the Nami in lane. Yeah. So in general, it's quite a big cost. And although the Nami will still be a strong choice, Ezreal Nami will still do competitively, you don't do great in that 2v2 matchup. And the Sivra's been banned so frequently, that utility in team fights too. So it's a pretty big cost for TSM.
Yeah, we could see it pretty early on. The Karma Sivir just has the control of the lane. Once they get access to the push, it's going to be shove, shove, shove all day. Especially the Skarner isn't really going to gank and ruin that too much. Should still be a tie farming lane. Nami has enough sustain to keep them in the game right there. Matchup I actually really like is the Aurelion Sol, because I think it kind of distorts the perception of a lot of matchups there in the mid lane. Because when you have Cassiopeia, notorious for strong early push, really strong early trading in a zone, well, Aurelion Sol is just going to say, you know what, I'm going to walk up to the creeps, push it, and even on level 2, steal away some of these Raptors already, So immense threat from the mid lane. If you look at RNG's composition as well, so many movement speed steroids, they can play a very mobile game. And in that sense, it would really be a bummer for them if this ASOL now turns out to be like bugged and they have to like remake the game, because like this is an entire composition that they probably like practiced a lot on. I hope we get it fixed.
Yeah, I hope so as well. Now, I do have a slight update. As it appears, the orbs that surround Aurelion Sol are disappearing when they make contact with a wall. So it is a different bug than what we've seen before. Still don't quite know what what the root cause of it is maybe behind that, or what the solution is yet, but just a little bit of an update. We're closer to an answer. And now I want to come back to this Champ Select discussion, because it's what we've got to talk about. Yeah. And point towards his top lane. We've seen a Kennen pick, our first one of the Worlds tournament here. Rumble, though, on the other side, already a mainstay of the world stage from this first day of play.
So Kennen is an incredibly dominant champion during the laning phase. He can go with the Doran's Blade from the start, has so much harass, but luckily Rumble, he's going to go with the Doran's Shield. He's going to have a lot of shields and be able to sustain himself relatively well throughout that laning phase, and it's just such a heavy skill matchup. They both have kill pressure, and believe it or not, it's really snowbally. Whichever one can get ahead of the other basically has kill pressure at level 6 every single time. So I'm looking for a lot of attention from these junglers, particularly at level 6. Even though they can put pressure early on, they really need the level 6 ultimates, not from the junglers, but from the laners themselves to really cement that advantage.
And it's a lane that's actually morphed a lot ever since Rumble got the ability to push the lane. Previously, it would be the range champion versus the melee, standing in front of the creeps or in the brush and just auto-attack harassing, and Rumble wouldn't have an answer. Now Rumble can get those 3 points in queue, shove back, give Kennen more of a time. Kennen doesn't have great AoE wave clear without getting into short range. So what used to be, I think, pretty slanted heavily to Kennen is now pretty much a 50-50 matchup.
No, the same still applies in terms of wave control, because when Rumble is pushing, he has no way out. Sure. So despite having the ability to push, definitely saw Papa's right on the money there. If you pop that Flame Spitter, like those creeps are going to evaporate. Problem is, Rumbles don't really like playing too overextended into lane, especially when they're laning against something with a heavy gap closer that can combo into like a crowd control effect like Kennen. Kennen himself can play pretty far up, because the Lightning Rush can always get you out of harm's way. It's going to be tricky for Lupa and MLXG here to combine Elysian Rumble with no hard CC to lock down a Kennen who is incredibly mobile. Yeah. Whereas like Kennen plus Skarner, they can aggressively flash and combine some of these hard crowd control effects, potentially take down the Rumble.
Well, I'm glad you brought that point up, because I do think that while there is difficulty with Lee Sin being able to make plays in those other areas by himself, I think this composition is just a matter of you tag team middle lane with Aurelion Sol, and you just go top, bottom, over and over with the Aurelion Sol roam. He's so powerful with this. Lee Sin can follow perfectly, and you're able to just have so much pressure. So obviously the RNG game plan is just to snowball off mid lane, which, to be honest, I've never really heard of a lot of people saying, oh yeah, our plan's to snowball off of Bjergsen.
Now, while we wait for some more info on this visual bug, I do want to pull us away from Champion Select and look at this matchup now more from the team's perspective. We talked a little bit about, RNG being this star-studded roster, and can they come together in a macro sense? And on the flip side, you've got TSM, who in their own region was looked at as an unstoppable macro team. Stylistically, disregarding even this Champion Select specific specifically, how exactly do we expect these teams to match up? Which lane might swing it all for these teams?
I mean, again, I think it's the duo rather than just a specific lane. I think it's all about Xiaohu and MLXG. These guys were so on form back when we were at MSI, and these two were really the carry duo. Then, of course, Uzi draws that pressure from the jungle. It's never so much about the mid lane and jungle. And Xiaohu's champion pool hasn't really stood the test of time. I was actually thinking he might pick up the Azir again here because he was a bit of a one-trick Azir and Xerath way back when he debuted in spring last year. But Aurelion Sol's so important for him because Aurelion Sol ditched his lane so well because he has strong pushing, leaves with a strong ganking jungler like the Lee Sin. They can make the plays, and I think they can be the ones to disrupt the flow of the well-practiced, well-drilled TSM team.
I think stylistically, TSM has an advantage in the macro, even though we saw them at playoffs and it wasn't really the crispest. You know, they have performed very well during the summer season in terms of understanding how to use wave management, pressure, especially during the lane stop. While that is still no longer a factor, the fundamentals that you learn there still apply to regular laning phase. Whereas RNG on the other side, they're a bit of a wild card in the actual macro game. You don't know what to expect, and if you don't have that consistency, it's really difficult to match up against a macro team. And that's why we saw for many years back all the teams trying to mimic Korea because their macro would just beat all the individual skill that you could.
Hey, if they have wildcard macro, they're actually gonna have really good macro.
I don't know,
Based
man.
on what we've seen today.
EU went 0-3.
Below the belt, man. Come on now.
They're the new macro. Look at me, I'm the macro team now. But yeah, if you look, actually, it's actually a point that they brought earlier up in the interview with INTZ. It's you don't judge a team just by the most recent like tournament or playoffs. You judge them by the regular season. And for TSM especially, they definitely showed that they have really good understanding of the macro elements of the game because they were such a quick team, had the fastest game times in NNA by a stretch because they finished so damn quick because they knew exactly what to do. They took a step back in playoffs, a little hesitant. The changes back to standard lanes, didn't have the greatest scrim week, so they took it slow and steady to win the games. But if TSM have reverted back to that original style, this should be really fun to watch in this tournament where it's definitely able to snowball.
Right, but if anything, seeing that within the regular season they had the quickest game times, and then even in the playoffs, losing a few minutes on that time and slowing down a bit, it shows that they're comfortable playing to both game lengths, right? Yeah. They're okay ending a game at 32 minutes on average, or going to that 38, 40-minute mark and still taking games home.
Yeah, and I think it shows with the drafting, basically a press R composition as well as a scaling Ezreal. We don't really see this so much from them. I mean, in the beginning of the season, it was all about Lucian, non-stop Lucian with that really fast early Black Cleaver Youmuu's build that just had such an immense power spike in the mid game. And now they're obviously reverting to a more, well, not reverting, but trying out this style that is a lot more controlled and more calculated, almost like what we saw out of Samsung in the previous game. And I'm excited to see what they can actually do with that because I haven't seen Svenskeren in NA play a level 6 jungler as such a level 6 jungler, unlike Gragas, who obviously can put a lot more pressure early on.
It's an interesting conversation around both Doublelift and Uzi, who are our featured matchup. So let's re-hit them real quick. I mean, in this champion select, Ez going over to Doublelift, we had expectations that Ezreal would be a largely contested pick for ADCs in this tournament. Sivir, though, going over to Uzi here. I mean, along with the Karma, so definitely filling more of that utility role, at least this time around for the team.
And Uzi, the one thing, we always talk about is the puppy. He was never a puppy that played nice with his teammates. He was all about himself. You wouldn't think of him as a Sivir player because, utility AD carry, even though now, of course, the late game damage is immense as well. But when he joined OMG, which, of course, was a roster, I guess, 2 teams ago for Uzi, now he's been
He went through
moving
puppy
around.
training.
It was an interesting couple of years there for Uzi. He's settled now on RNG. Specifically on OMG, he played for the team. He played this Sivir. It was his best champion. I honestly think it's one of his best picks. It might not be the Caitlyn that was banned away, so it's not the same laning powerhouse, but it gives utility, and it's still that late game hyper carry fantasy that Uzi always wants to aspire for.
All right, so I have to jump in here and give some more context on what's happening. The players have been excused from the stage because there will be a full remake. Now, in terms of Aurelion Sol, there's still some discussion on whether or not he will be disabled. So that information I will get to you as soon as I have it. But for now, the teams have been informed there will be a full remake. We're going to provide them with some time so that they can go back and retool for Champions Select, because as we had hit that game of record time, there will be the possibility of new picks, new bans. So now let's kind of refocus our conversation on this game 2, right? In that we have some information now about what these teams want to do, and so do they. and they're going to be coming back for this second champ select with this information in mind.
Yeah.
It's basically a moment where everybody shows like, oh, this is what I got, and then just kidding. All right, let's do it again, right? It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, and a surprise, and then now you try again. So I'm really curious to see how they deem this draft, because particularly for RNG, it was very clear what they were trying to target, just a full-on jungle ban. And I mean, let's say that TSM wasn't happy with the Skarner pick. They could easily revert and first pick Lee Sin. It changes so much because of how detailed the draft was from RNG.
At the same time, there are no real big surprises here. Most of these picks are what's considered meta here at the tournament, like the Rumble Cannon in top lane. We've seen that Casio. We've seen that, like, NA is no stranger to Aurelion Sol here, so like there's no really big surprises. Yes, there is in priority, but these teams have to be flexible. If they want to make it out of group stages after 6 games, yes, it's very unfortunate. But I don't think it will hit either team way too hard. If it's not like they prepared only one draft.
I hope not. God, I hope not. That would be an awful way to approach a six separate best of ones. I mean, we kind of saw it last year with NA. That Azir Tristana composition that so many of the NA teams had revolved around was completely dismantled in week 2.
I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Crepo. I think the RNG have shown more here. They've banned junglers, so you know that so much. That's in their thoughts. Aurelion Sol, I believe this is the first or second pick for Xiaohu. He hasn't played. That champion's been very underplayed in a lot of regions, but specifically in the LPL. So showing a new champion, showing a priority when it comes to bans, I think this actually just strengthens TSM going into the remake game.
But there was a very late surge on the Aurelion Sol because the champion that did everything the same was the Talia. It's very similar in gameplay patterns, and that one got nerfed at the end of the season. So I think these teams are used to playing with fast push mid laners that can then roam. It's just champion has a different name now.
Sure.
All right, well, now while the teams prepare to remake the game with new picks and bans, we need to take a quick break. So don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back in 3.5.